My guest today is Imani Jackson, an experienced educator currently working as an elementary school teacher in a traditional private school in Philadelphia, who is embarking on her entrepreneurial journey this fall by launching Poinciana Montessori in the Germantown section of Philadelphia with a co-founder colleague of hers, Kareem Rogers. Poinciana Montessori will be part or is part of the Wildflower Montessori Microschool Network, a fast-growing network of Montessori microschools that focuses on culturally relevant curriculum, economic access and equity, and fostering an inclusive, diverse learning environment. So excited to hear about Imani's pre-launch journey. Imani Jackson, welcome to the Liberated Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. I had a chance to meet you in person recently, you and Kareem, and hear about your pre-launch story and what it takes to get a microschool off the ground in Germantown. So I wanted you to share your story with a wider audience who I think might benefit from, again, those steps that you've taken, some of those challenges that you've encountered as you get ready to open your doors this fall in Germantown. So let's start, Imani, with your background as an educator. Tell us a little bit about your experience in education over the past several years.
Sure. Well, I was lucky enough to be born to a mother who is an educator. So I got to be around students. She is a special educator. So I got to be around students with differences since I was born. And that just cemented in me that I wanted to be a teacher, which was an interesting road because my mother was like, "You're good at so many things. Why are you going to become a teacher?" And I said, this is what I want to do. So I went to Hood College in Frederick, Maryland, and I wound up kind of creating my own major. So when I initially went to be a special education major, but the way that they treated special ed in Maryland was so different than it was in Pennsylvania. And I was like, this is kind of seems to be like really skirting the law here and in terms of like least restrictive environment and everything. So I couldn't really handle that. So I was like, well, I'll switch to regular education. And then I was a little bit lost. So I kind of dabbled into like different parts of regular education. I settled upon English as a as a second language. And I helped out in a high school program there, which was very interesting because I think I was 18 and the oldest students were somewhere between 17 and 19, just because a lot of them were immigrants and sometimes, they were put back a few years. So there were students that were the same age, if not a little bit older than I. But I really enjoyed the challenge of that. So when I went to college, the internet was in its infancy. So I wound up searching ESL programs near Frederick, Maryland, and this program called the French Immersion Program popped up. Now, I've been speaking French since I was 7. I am fluent now. I was mostly fluent then. And I was like, ooh, how can I do this? And it completely married my two loves. It married French and education. So I wound up being an early childhood education major, which meant that I was qualified from N, which is newborn or no school, to 3rd grade, while also pursuing my French degree. I wound up living in France for a little while and then coming back and teaching in the French immersion program, which is in Montgomery County. It's the second oldest immersion program in the entire country, and the oldest French immersion program in the entire country.
And this was in public schools then in Maryland?
It was
In elementary
it's a public
schools?
school in elementary. It's a
Huh.
magnet program. So it's placed in a school of great need and hoping to, pull families to that area. It sort of worked. So the population of the surrounding neighborhood would fluctuate a lot. But our program was very much in high demand at all times. So at that point, I was one teacher with 26 students, me just um, uh, just me speaking French to students
Mm.
who did not understand me. And so I had to make my input as comprehensible as possible and figure out a way to help these students understand me. I did that for 14 years. I wound up actually becoming a nationally board certified teacher. It was something that I always wanted to do. And I decided to do it. It was very difficult as a French immersion teacher. I had to subtitle all of my videos and provide them a script for like what I was saying. The kids could speak in English, so it wasn't as important for the students. Um, and so
And
that's what I wound up doing. And I have always loved teaching, always loved what I'm doing. So it's been amazing.
so you were 14 years in the public schools in Maryland doing that
Mhm.
French immersion program for elementary school students.
Yes.
Okay. And then what happened?
Then I decided I had a little girl. So I have a 5-year-old daughter. And in my life plan, I was only supposed to be in Maryland 10 years. So I was already 4 years past my plan. And I said, I need to go back home. I needed to be both of my dad was very, very sick. But I just needed to be closer to family. So luckily my husband at the time was a district attorney and he was highly sought after in Philadelphia, which is, close to where I grew up. And so we moved to Philadelphia and I started teaching in a regular not in a private school here. And things were okay. I had a really rough first year. But after that, I had a great, couple of years of a run. COVID was actually my first year here at this school. So it hit in March of my first year. And that was interesting, but I love technology, so I did not mind using technology to meet my students. And we did a lot of adjustments in my class to make sure we were meeting the needs of the students. So I felt relatively comfortable that students were making the progress that they needed to make, even though we weren't meeting with them face to face. But we did wind up coming back in March of the second year. So it
So
was an entire year
So it was also
almost.
this COVID time, Imani, that you kind of discovered Montessori, right? As you were working with your daughter at home, kind of learning alongside her. I wonder if you can tell us what was happening at the same time that you're kind of teaching remotely at your private school, you were kind of homeschooling, living and learning alongside your young daughter, and then discovered homeschooling. And I'm also just going to now I'll invite Kareem Rogers in, your co-founder of Poinciana Montessori, who's going to join us as well. But um, just say hello to Kareem.
Hello.
Hi, Kareem. Welcome. Thanks for
Th-
being here.
Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm doing well. Great to see you again.
Thank you.
Imani was just telling us a little bit about her education background and her experience as a teacher in public schools and in private schools. And she was just about to tell us how COVID kind of led to her discovery of Montessori and the perspective on education as a parent and what she wanted for her daughter's education. So, Imani, if you could continue with that, and then we'll loop Kareem into the conversation to talk about kind of what happened next for you both in creating this new school.
Sure. So COVID happened and my daughter turned 2 the second week of the lockdown. And I was like, okay, I have this newly minted 2-year-old. I have all of this time. I had always in the back of my mind kind of wanted to homeschool, but I knew that I wouldn't have the time. So I'm like, time and opportunity. Let's homeschool. So I started looking up all of these different education methods. I loved Charlotte Mason because of the emphasis on beautiful books, but she also suggests that you be outside 4 to 6 hours a day. And my daughter was not having that. So I started to like try and find other ways that my daughter really enjoyed learning. And I gave her a Montessori type activity. And my daughter's an extremely social child. She really wants to talk to everybody all the time and always has. And the activity kept her quiet for about 10 minutes, which almost never happens. And so I was like, I found what works for her. And she liked it. And she was able to let us know that she liked it. So I started to do some more research on Montessori. In traditional circles, Montessori is not always uh, looked upon favorably. So I had some experience with some students who came from Montessori schools in the public school system, but we were kind of like, those weirdos over there kind of thing. And now here I am, I'm like having to kind of eat crow a little bit. So I did a lot of research about Montessori, guidepost Montessori, pivoted as soon as COVID started, and they put a lot of things out online. And they offered a lot of free webinars just to find out what is Montessori, and what does it mean for my student. And so I attended one of those, which was okay, but really what hooked me was a webinar about Montessori herself and her story. And I was like, why do more people not know this? This is amazing.
What was
And
it
the
about her
more
story? Do you remember?
the fact that she actually, this was action research. She was not an educator. She was a doctor. And due to the fact of being a woman in the 1800s, 1900s, and the establishment not wanting to allow her to practice, she was kind of shunted to the side to deal with people with mental illness. And at the time, they were segregated and they were not treated very well. And so she went in and she saw children mixed in with adults, and it's white walls, there's no materials, there's no nothing. And the people who were interacting with them were not treating them very nicely. And so after they would eat, the children would get on the floor and they would play with the food, with the crumbs. And the people who were there, they were like, look at these dirty animals, they're playing with the crumbs. And what she saw was, no, they need more stimulus. They need something to do. They're bored, their brains are atrophying. And so she just started trying different things. And it worked. And so as she's trying different things, she's getting a little bit more renown and she's speaking about what she's trying. But she was pretty clear in most of her speeches. She's like, I am not an educator. I am a doctor. I am trying things, seeing what's working, keeping what's working, and changing what's not. And so when she started her famous Casa de Bambini, the children's house, she literally was like, okay, well, this is what I think kids might like, and let's see how it goes. And so the whole reason that we have child-size materials and practical life in Montessori is because she saw that's what the kids wanted. That's how they gravitated towards. They actually didn't gravitate towards the toys. They wanted to do things that were like adults. They wanted to have places to sit that were like their teachers. And so there's that famous story that talks about the one time they used to lock up all of the materials. And one day they forgot to do, her co-teacher forgot to do it. And the teachers were late and they came in and the students had taken all of the materials out and were working with them independently. And that was another light bulb for her to go, oh, children can do this. If you teach them you give them freedom within limits. The students weren't told what materials they had to use. They basically had the entire cabinet and they were able to choose what was important to them at that time. And they could work on it for an extended period of time with no interruptions. So this is what she's seeing, and she's refining her approach during, I don't know, I think it's like 30, 40 years of education action research. And so this is the research that we've been looking for.
Right.
About how students learn and, how to get them to attend to the things that we want them to attend to. These are all things that we talk about in traditional education, allowing children movement, allowing children choice, allowing hands-on materials. These are all things that we know work, and she knew this 100 years ago.
So you discover Montessori, become fascinated with Maria Montessori and her philosophy for education. And then did you decide then that you might want to open a school kind of during this COVID time, or what happened after you discovered Montessori?
It was always in the back of my head that, maybe someday I would open a school, but I really didn't want to be a principal.
Mhm.
Uh, and so there were some things that were happening at my current school that I was like, well, maybe I should start my own school. So during COVID, I did search like how to start a school. Like people were doing pods and
Yeah.
things like that. So I was searching, and I actually got involved with another school startup. It was an international school. I served them for about a year virtually. So I was just looking for more resources. And Wildflower was actually the first hit that I got during COVID. But at that time, they only had like about 11 schools. And I was and most of them were in Boston and in Puerto Rico. There were a couple more sprinkled around, but not very many. And I was like, this is too good to be true. Nobody's just going to give me money to help me start a school. Like that's got to be a scam. So I kind of like let that go, continued on with life, worked with this other startup school, worked at my current school. I was just, doing what I do. I love to teach and I love the education realm. So I was doing all of that. And then a little bit out, once we came out of COVID a little bit, we were back in school. I searched it again and about 2 years later and Wildflower came up. And this time they had like 20, 30 schools. And I was like, this must be a real thing then. And at that time, our hub lead is Sunny. And she was there to contact about how to get started as a wildflower school. Previously, there was nobody to contact. And so I just wrote her an email, President's Day weekend, not thinking I would hear back for a long while. I heard back the next morning at 6 a.m. And she's like, yes, I love your story. I kind of sent her just off the cuff of a school that I would want to start. I hadn't quite fleshed it all out, but I was like, this is kind of my preliminary vision. And she was like, I love it. Let's talk and let's do this. And that's how I started.
Amazing. Yeah. And you mentioned Sunny Greenberg, who works with the Wildflower Network to help support new and aspiring education entrepreneurs. She's just lovely what she's doing in Philadelphia and in surrounding areas to support education entrepreneurs in the Wildflower Network, which, as you mentioned, has really grown leaps and bounds from its early start in Cambridge, Massachusetts, with one microschool in 2014 to now over 60 microschools across the country and in Puerto Rico, including some public charter schools in New York City, Minneapolis, Washington, D.C. I think there's others coming as well. I was able to visit the charter school, the Wildflower Charter School in the South Bronx, and had those founders on this podcast as well. So just great to see that growth. It looks like we just lost Kareem. Maybe he'll pop back in.
He said the internet is going out in the other building. So he said he's going to try and hook up internet to reconnect.
Okay. Well, so maybe you can say then, what happened next? You connected with Sunny and then kind of really began the planning process for opening the school. And is that when you and Kareem connected? I know you are colleagues at the current private school that you're working in. How did that kind of initial stage from connecting with Sunny to saying, all right, we're going to do this? How did that go?
So Sunny made it very clear I needed a partner. I had a very close friend here at my school. However, she taught preschool. I mean, not preschool. She taught pre-K. And what I knew about Montessori, I was like, well, we could do that. We could have one class of 3 to 6 and one class of lower elementary. I said, sounds great. Let's do this. So I talked to her. She was interested. We had another colleague also who was maybe interested in at least learning about Wildflower. And then I spoke to Kareem and who was like, yes, I'm interested. So we did the visioning process. I kind of spearheaded the visioning process and talked about visioning is wonderful because, where there's no vision, the people fail. So I love visioning. So I was like, if pie in the sky, if I could have any school, this is what I would have. This is my vision for it. I love using images and words and things like that. And Sunny loved it because it brought it to life. People could see my vision. And so after visioning,
And
my close
can you share a little bit about that vision and how it ties in with the Wildflower Network's philosophy as well? Yeah.
Sure. So our vision is really to bring high quality Montessori education to children who may not normally have access to it, and especially using the African centered education model. We don't know more than what's kind of publicly available. So public schools, private schools, but they're not really aware of some of these what the world deems alternative education models, even though I don't think Montessori really should be labeled like that, but that's how general people label it. But they're not aware of other ways to learn that might be more effective for certain students. And so for us, it was really important to get back to our community and say, hey, here's a way for students that maybe can't sit all day. Here's a way for them to learn. Here's a way for students who absolutely need to use their hands to learn. Here's a way. And both of us are very understanding that Montessori is not for every student. I wouldn't want to ever go out there and say like I think that every student could benefit from certain aspects of Montessori, but a full Montessori classroom is not necessarily meant for every student. But people don't know if they don't know. And so for us, it's going back to our community and saying, this is available and it works. It's worked for 100 years. Come, bring your child, see if this is going to be effective for your child, and the sky is the limit. One of the wonderful things about Montessori is you follow the child. So if a child is very strong in math and that's really their bent, we don't say, no, you can't read, but we say, hey, how's a way that we can incorporate that math that you really love into reading that maybe is a little bit more difficult for you? Here, what's a way that you can show, an alternate way that you can show that you learned something? And I know I shared this anecdote with you, but it was just amazing to me. There, Hyacinth Montessori is another elementary in Philadelphia. They're in West Philly. And I follow their Instagram. And I happened to go on one day and they had a student who had just done angles, but their class was really into handwork. So embroidery, finger knitting, any sort of crafty thing. And this child went and embroidered a sampler for each different type of angle. So that tells me that that child really understands what angles are and what it means. So it's not just that they're labeling something on a sheet of paper, like they really had to think about, because the child planned this, the teacher did not, they maybe guided them, but the child had to come out and say, this is what I want to do. And so the best way to show that you've learned something is to teach somebody else. And that's a way to teach somebody is to have this and say, this is what I did. So, and like I said, it's not necessarily a paper pencil follow-up. It was, using their hands, and it took a long while. This child had to plan it out and stick with it. So some of those soft education skills that we talk about that are really, one of the things I enjoy about Montessori is it's not kind of hidden. So in regular education, there's the academic curriculum, and then there are the other skills that we would like kids to learn, but we don't have a plan to teach them. It's just when it comes up, we'll talk about it. Well, it's very planned out in Montessori. It's the grace and courtesy curriculum. And Montessori was very much saying that this is education for life. So we hear a lot of people talking now about adulting and how difficult that is for them. Well, Montessori was like, well, I'm going to teach you how to adult. I'm going to teach you how to bank. I'm going to teach you how to persevere if you have a problem. I'm going to teach you how to problem solve. I'm going to teach you how to set a table. I'm going to teach you how to greet a visitor. So that other part of Montessori is like really exciting for me. And I think that it's something that parents are looking for.
Yeah.
They're seeing that kids are really lacking in those skills because of the pandemic, because of whatever it is. And I think parents are really excited about knowing that this is something that is going to be it's something that's going to be very much important in their child's education in this school. It's not just going to be kind of haphazard. We're going to take time to actually teach these skills.
Yeah, I just adore the Montessori philosophy. I think it's just so great and wonderful to see more entrepreneurs starting more Montessori schools. You said that, part of your goal or vision was to bring Montessori to the Germantown neighborhood of Philadelphia that might not have had a lot of access or exposure to the Montessori philosophy. And you also mentioned that your Montessori micro school will be focused on sort of an Afrocentric curriculum. And I know Wildflower more generally really values and embraces, diversity and inclusive classroom, focus on equity and access for students. What makes your program different from that, or the same? But what is it about that kind of Afrocentric focus that you find really important?
So Afrocentrism, one of the biggest aspects of it is the sense of communalism. So coming together as a community. So not just a school community, but a neighborhood community, servant-heartedness, just those different values. So kind of like the grace and courtesy, but even more extended in thinking about how to build children up so that they know who they are, so they can then learn. There's been some research that shows that students that have a great self-concept do better as learners. So we want to build them up as for who they are, and then also help them then learn academically as well.
Really exciting. And then the other piece that I think makes your micro school, sort of unique is a lot of the Wildflower Montessori schools are focused on preschool programs, but you really wanted to create an elementary school model for Poinciana Montessori. And you mentioned Hyacinth Montessori, which is the only other Wildflower Montessori micro school in Philadelphia that's an elementary program. There are other preschool programs, including one that your daughter attends, and that you're hoping she then transitions into your elementary program. Was it really kind of thinking about your daughter and your role as a parent that led you to want to open Poinciana as an elementary program, or was there something else to that you just gravitated toward?
Well, quite frankly, I spent a lot of my early education in early education. So I was a kindergarten teacher. I am now teaching second grade and I love it and never want to leave second grade. And so for me, I wanted to stay in the elementary in the elementary realm of education. Originally, our school was going to start as a preschool, but one of the wonderful things about Wildflowers, you go into this advice process. And during our advice process, they were like, well, there are a lot of there's already a lot of preschools there. Really think about focusing on the elementary first. And then if you're seeing that you need a feeder school and you still have teachers who are interested, then bring in a preschool. And it was a very big shift for us because envisioning, we were very focused on the preschool aspect. And then we had to shift and go, okay, there's this need for elementary. And at that time, my child was at not the current school that she's at, but a different Montessori school. And they only went up to lower elementary in Montessori. So 6 through 8-year-olds. And then after that, they went into traditional education. So there was no, in the city, there was no elementary before Hyacinth, no full elementary for Montessori. And I was like, well, that is definitely needed. We have all of these preschools that are Montessori or Montessori adjacent, and it's definitely needed to have an elementary school. So for me, it was really important once we got the mindset of, okay, let's start an elementary. It was really important for me to go, yes, this is extremely needed. And let's do this. Let's serve our community in the best way that we can.
So you sort of mentioned this earlier, but I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about how Wildflower works and the relationship between kind of education entrepreneurs like you and the Wildflower Montessori Foundation, because you mentioned, when you were Googling how to start a school and Wildflower popped up, you said, this is too good to be true. They can't possibly just be giving me money to start a program. It's a little more complicated than that. I wonder if you can share some of the details of how you're supported through the Wildflower Network.
So I will preface this in saying I've had an amazing experience. Not everybody experienced, not that people have had a bad experience, but not everybody's experience is my experience. Sunny is one of the reasons that we've had such an amazing experience. We also really have a very close pod. So there are 4 current schools in Philadelphia, Clover, which is where my daughter is, Spice Bush, which is in, I want to say Bucks County, Hyacinth, which is in West Philly. Oh, I guess there's only 3. There's 3, and then us. So that's 4. But we're all really close. And so we forged these bonds. We all kind of went through the process somewhat together. So Jake and Eileen, who are the founders of Clover, were the kind of the pioneers. They did it first. But Hyacinth and Spice Bush were right behind them. And we actually joined at the same time that Spice Bush was finishing up. So like we're all kind of overlapping. And so because of that, we're all very, very close. So, but basically how it works is what I did is, like I said, I reached out to Sunny, said I was interested in starting a school. Sunny said, I love your story. Let's keep in contact. And so I started having bi-weekly meetings with Sunny to just talk about the process. Like, what does it mean to be a wildflower school? What does it mean to be an entrepreneur? What did I need to help start this school? She really just kind of held my hand through it to say, this is what you need to do next. This is what you need to do next. This is what you need to do next. In addition, I would follow up anything that she said. She's like, you should talk to these people. And I was like, okay, let's make an introduction. Let me talk to these people. So in addition to doing what she was suggesting, I also got to know some people at the foundation level, so the national level, which has been really helpful. But basically, there are kind of like 3 discrete sections. So there's the visioning section, which is the first section where you go, I think I might want to start a school. And a site entrepreneur comes with you, hold your hand like Sunny did, and said, let's, get your vision started. Let's make this plan. How do you think you might do it? And then you have what we call the advice process. Once you think that you're under that visioning, like there is a checklist that they give you. But like once you get to the end of that checklist, you go, okay, I'm ready to get this advice. And Sunny was really amazing. She reached out to some foundation people for me. I also, though, started going to some virtual meet and greets, and I got to know some foundation level people there. So I asked them to be on my advice committee. I reached out to Renee at Roxbury Roots, who is the other Afrocentric school in the Wildflower Network. She's in Roxbury, Massachusetts. She said yes, but unfortunately at the time was not able to like give us as much advice as we wanted, but she has been instrumental in our success thus far. So, but she was there. I actually had a very huge advice panel because I reached out to any and everybody. I spoke with Lindsay Barnes, who is also now a foundation partner with them as well for marketing advice, because I felt that was my weakness. So I had this huge advice panel, and I came in front of them and I basically said, this is my vision. And at the end of that, they give you advice. They say, yes, we think this is good, or, oh, maybe you should change this, or have you thought about this? They're really not going to tell you no per se, but they are going to really caution you if they think it's something that you should really truly take to heart and think about. And if it will cause harm to anything, of course they will say no. But at the end of my visioning, like everybody was like, we love this. When's this school opening? And I was like, okay, let's slow down a little bit. We got some steps in there. So that is also when I got the suggestion about focusing more into elementary. So then Kareem and at that point it was Kareem and I, we were the founders. And so we kind of had to discover who we were at that point. So after visioning, we said, this is what we want to do. And then we go into planning, which is the nuts and bolts of how are you actually going to do this? Where are you going to be? What kind of facility might you want to have? How much money do you think you might need? How are you going to raise this money? Like doing all the business aspects part of it, you know, becoming a corporation and all of that. So that came in the planning stages. Sunny was still there. This was a summer. We were meeting almost every day, trying to get everything, to everything, hammered out. We were making lots of phone calls, or I was on the phone a lot. I was also in training at the same time, so that was fun.
To become Montessori certified.
Yes.
Training.
So,
Yeah.
Elementary training for Montessori is intense and long. It's a 2-year training. So this was my second year of Montessori. So I was actually living with my parents for 2 weeks because I needed consistent support with my daughter. So I was like, I'm gonna have to be here for 2 weeks. And they were like, that's okay. Um, but that was like the nuts and bolts of like, how are you gonna do this? And so nothing is really like 100% set in stone unless you already have a space. Like at that point, we had different neighborhoods pinpointed, but we didn't have a space. So we thought we might want to be in Mount Airy or Roxborough or East Falls, which are all pretty close neighborhoods in Philly, but they all have different flavors. And so we were kind of like shifting, our thinking about our school, depending on what neighborhood we thought we might want to go to. But then at the end of the summer, we had our planning meeting to say, this is our business plan. This is what we think we're going to do. And that's also when they sign off on it and they go, yes, this sounds like a great plan. Or sometimes they go, come back to the drawing board and just let us know, how you changed some things. For us, we were able to pretty much go full steam ahead. Now, a lot of people can go straight into their startup, which is become like starting the school. We got held up with real estate. So for the next year, we were looking for real estate.
Yeah, I want to talk about that in just a minute. But in terms of the planning, it's around the planning stage or after visioning that you essentially enter into this agreement with Wildflower to affiliate with them. So a lot of the kind of initial visioning conversations you had with Sunny for many months, there was no obligation, there was no affiliation. It was just kind of getting your feet wet. And then eventually you say, okay, yes, I want to do this and I want to affiliate with Wildflower. And then, like you said, they were able to connect you with various, grants or other kind of funding sources. And then there's also a low interest loan. Is that right? With Wildflower Foundation that founders are able to access. I wonder if you could talk about that.
So yes, so the funding sources are 2 to 3 strands, depending on how you look at it. So you have somebody like Sunny, who is a site entrepreneur, whose job it is to connect us to different grants that we can get. And so like Sunny is fundraising for us constantly. So that's part of what we get. Also, the other part is from the Wildflower Foundation itself. We get a low interest loan. And as part of that, there are pretty strict rules about what your school has to show to be eligible for this loan. So the rules have changed a little bit since I started, but right now we need to be in like a low income area. You have to show that your school can be in the it's profitable by year 3. And then also that you can pay the loan off in 7 years. So that's like the big buckets. But the nice thing about it is numbers kind of scare me, and I think that they scare a lot of teachers out there. But there is just an amazing financial team that comes alongside of you to say, here's all the help that we can give you to really think about this. Like, you do have to crunch your numbers and really think things out, but they're there to help. They really are. And And then the third bucket is teacher contribution. So we
Mm.
have to contribute about 10%, but it can be in kind, it can be donations, it can be any fundraising that we do, it can be sweat equity. So that 10% is it doesn't necessarily have to be monetary. Like,
So
yes.
yeah, so I'd love to ask you, Imani, going back to when you were Googling how to start a school and wondering, could this be too good to be true with Wildflower? I mean, there's a lot of founders who go off and create micro schools without affiliating with a network, without being connected to kind of a broader micro school network or a series of schools. What is sort of your sense of what the benefit is to joining a network like Wildflower compared to kind of going it solo?
All of the help that you get. So Lindsay Barnes, who is a founder with Wildflower, she started a school. She helped somebody start a school in California, and she talks all the time about how hard it was. She's like, we got it done, we did it, but it was incredibly hard. This is hard, but like I'm not like going home at the end of the day and crying most days. Um, if I ever need something, somebody's there to help. And that was actually something that was very attractive to me. So, but most teacher leaders before they actually get involved with Wildflower go to a teacher leader. They have every month we have teacher leaders that come and share their story. There was a teacher leader from the Bronx, not the Rose School. I think it's the Gloria Alderman School, but they changed their name. But he came in and he said exactly that. He said, whatever you need, there is somebody at Wildflower who, if they can't provide it for you, will find a way to get it to you. And 99% of the time, if I've gone to any national level person that I know at Wildflower, it's usually Sunny, but occasionally, there's other people that I go to. I'll say we need X. And then X somehow makes its way to my email box or contact this person. Maggie Barnes, Maggie, what's Maggie's last name? I can't remember Maggie's last name. But Maggie is a very high level partner at Wildflower. I will think of her last name in a second. And I happened to be speaking to her and I was talking about how difficult real estate was. And by chance, I don't know, but like a week later, I had an email in my box going, oh, I happen to be talking to somebody and I know this developer in Philadelphia and they're really interested in opening a Wildflower or opening a Montessori school. You should go talk to them. Now, we wound up not going with that building. It wasn't in the right place for us. But the fact was, I said I need, and it somehow came through. So I really highly commend all other micro school leaders who have started it on their own. Like, I can't imagine doing it. It is so incredibly hard and it's rewarding, but it is incredibly hard. And I feel blessed that I have been able to benefit from this network, to
Yeah.
benefit from people who really believe in my school and want it to not only, just come to fruition, but thrive.
Yeah, just having that
So
support, all of those mentors, all of those resources, just that community just must feel really supportive of you, must feel really like people have your back as you're taking this entrepreneurial leap. So it's not quite so scary. And yet, I will say, Imani, that you still run into many of the same challenges of the other education entrepreneurs that I interview on this podcast who may be going it alone or not, who may be a part of a network as well. And that is typically around location and finding space. And I know that was your big hiccup. You had actually hoped to launch a year ago and had families lined up, and that space didn't work out. I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about some of the challenges you've encountered with finding a location.
Wow. So we came about at kind of not a great time. So both Hyacinth and Clover opened mid-pandemic. And so that was when people were either closing schools or just schools weren't thriving. And so they managed to, get materials from schools that were closing or benefit from the fact that there was lots of real estate that nobody was going into at that time. Hyacinth did have some troubles around real estate, but they kind of benefited from that. We came in after people were coming out of COVID, and because money was tight, nobody wanted to rent. Everybody wanted to sell, and we could not afford to buy. And so most of the places that we were looking at, they were just like, well, we want to sell this. We don't want to rent it. Or it was just in the wrong area of the city. The space that I was telling you about before, it was amazing and beautiful. And I love the developers, but it just was not in the right area of the city for us. Um, there was just nothing out there. Like we worked with 2 different real estate agents. We worked for over a year to just find anything that would seem to be appropriate for our students, and just there was nothing there.
And then you happen to just stumble upon the current space, just serendipitously. Tell us about that.
So this is the second year out of the pandemic, and so a lot more construction projects were going on. A lot of construction money had gotten held up with like COVID money. I don't know all the politics around that, but I know that there was a huge construction boom like right when I happened to find this space. And it's on a main street in Philadelphia called Germantown Avenue, which is where my daughter's school is. And so it's also where my current school is off of. It's not exactly on it. And so I go up this street every single day going to go pick my daughter either up from school or drop her off from school. And at this point I was picking her up, and it's late, and this building had been there. It was like a little shell, but construction had stopped during COVID. And then I noticed that construction started going again. And I was like, oh, cool, there's this building and it's going by. And so I watched this building for like 6-7 months. And then finally I was like, is that an area in the bottom? Is that a commercial space? I was like, oh, I'll have to. So there's a website called LoopNet that has a lot of commercial properties. I was like, I'll have to look on LoopNet for it. So of course, then I had to find its address. Never really popped up on LoopNet. And so I was like, well, maybe it isn't a commercial area, or maybe they already have a tenant. And then one day during the summer, I never go to my school during the summer, but I dropped my daughter off, and for some reason I was headed toward my school. And the posters went up in this space. And I was like, let me just write down, I'm driving. I was like, let me just write down the number really quickly. So I went on the website, got the number. I wrote down the number, but went on the website and double checked, reached out to them, and the real estate agent immediately got back to me, because of course I put my pitch in the voicemail. And she was like, you're the exact tenant that we want. She was like, I didn't even start my marketing. We really wanted an elementary school. She's like, and one of the things that they did say in their materials, they wanted a neighborhood focused tenant. And she was like, this is exactly what we want. We want you. And so I was like, okay. So Kareem and I went to go look at the space. I was like, okay, workable, doable. We had to do some negotiations, but we ultimately, put in an offer. It was accepted. But it's never that straightforward. So then actually getting the lease done took about 3 to 4 months, and it was a lot. It was a lot. It's really, really difficult. And then, but it got signed. It got signed, and now we're working on the build out. So we're rounding third. I'll say that.
Yeah, and you're fairly confident you're fairly confident that this is going to open, everything's going to be done for opening in the fall, and you're confident that you'll have a core group of families, many of whom are interested from the preschool that your daughter attends or some other Montessori preschools in the area. Tell us a little bit about that. How are you marketing? How are you letting families know that you are opening? What is that process like?
So as you'll hear from a lot of wildflower schools or even micro schools, a lot of it's word of mouth. So I happened to go to like my daughter's winter party at her school, and a parent asked like, what am I up to? And I just let it slip that I was opening a wildflower school, and it got around the party. Like all like people are coming up like, I heard you're starting a school. I heard you're starting a school. I heard you're starting school. So that was kind of like the first kind of word of mouth. We've had to be very careful at our school, but like we've kind of let people know, no, I don't want to say it like that. When direct questions have come, we've let people know that a school is opening. We haven't said we're doing it, but like we're like keep your ear out. There's a school opening. You might be interested in this. We have actually just today, officially it came out from my daughter's elementary school. They sent our marketing flyer out and our website out. So we're hoping to get official families from there.
From that preschool. Oh,
We
that's
will
great.
So we're hoping to, there's a preschool, there's a Head Start right next door to our building.
Mm.
So we're going to, of course, contact them. My daughter went to a different preschool area here that has a Head Start as well. I know them. We're going to market to them as well. So there's lots of preschools in the area. At my daughter's former school, I actually was pretty open there that I was opening a school, and they were excited about it there. So
Right.
I can't officially market there, but I could definitely like put it up in the neighborhood and let word of mouth go and do its thing.
And how many learners do you think you'll open with in the fall?
So our goal is to open with 12 to 14 in the fall. We're actually hoping to have about 20 students for a summer camp this summer. So that's also
Okay.
kind of a way to get people who maybe are interested, but maybe they're like a little bit older. So we are opening 6 to 8. So we're anticipating maybe people who are their students are going into second grade. So they're 6 turning 7 or just 7. They're like, I'm not sure if I want to leave my school yet. We're hoping to have the summer camp, and they can see how we go, and then they'll come, and hopefully they'll come as a 7 or an 8-year-old, and then we'll continue adding on ages after that.
Yeah, and you'll add in grades, and then do you think you'll go through middle school, or what are your thoughts?
Yes,
Yes.
our aim is to go up to age 13, because technically in Montessori it ends at 12, but we feel like it's it's not a service to our community to have these students all the way up to 12 and then have them go to a strange middle school for 1 year before then they have to go to high school. So we're very committed to kind of being kind of a bridge middle school, like upper elementary, like first year of middle school, before students go to high school.
So, Imani, one reputation that I think Montessori schools have is that they are expensive. And the Wildflower Montessori Network tries to address that by creating some different kinds of tiers and different tuition scales for learners to make sure that there is economic diversity and accessibility for learners. I wonder if you can talk about what that looks like for your school.
So for our school, we have, I think, 6 different tiers. And it ranges between 5,000 and then $20,000 for students to attend our school. And then our midpoint is a point that both Kareem and I are working teachers and professionals. Both of us are married to professionals. And it was very important for us to say, what would be our comfortable point? Like if we had to pay, well, we are both paying for tuition, but if we're paying tuition, what's a dollar amount where it is enough that we feel that we could run this school, but also where parents feel like they would have enough money to be able to live comfortably. So it was really important for us to do that. And so we built our numbers around that.
So it's sort of the lower end is 5,000, the top end is
So
20.
mhm. And so the reason that we have so many different tiers as well is we were looking at free and reduced lunch as a measure for encouraging students from certain backgrounds, economic backgrounds, to come to our school. And so kind of our lower tiers are using those numbers in consideration, along with Wildflower uses kind of the HUD numbers as well. So we use both.
Yeah, and $20,000 is still quite a lot for tuition, and financially inaccessible to a lot of families. But to put it in perspective, it's still quite a bit cheaper than traditional private schools and in and around Philadelphia, secular private schools in and around Philadelphia. So, in that sense, it's more affordable than what we would think of for traditional schools, and it's also less than what the Philadelphia public schools spend per pupil each year, which is a little over $22,000 per student per year in the Philadelphia public schools. So it's still a lot of money, but I guess in context, is again lower than what some of the competitors would be. And trying to reach out to your community and serve your community, and provide Montessori education to families regardless of their financial constraints. So it's just so wonderful to see what you're doing there. I'm so excited to see your growth and development over the coming months and years. So what's next for you, as you prepare to open?
So right now we're kind of in our marketing and fundraising time. We are keeping eyes and tabs on the building. The good thing is I drive past it every single day, so I get to kind of see how things are going in there. So we are really focused in on build out, marketing, and fundraising. Like those are our three big areas right now.
Great. And so as we begin to wrap up, Imani, I'd love to just hear your advice to other prospective founders, other teachers or parents who are looking to launch a micro school or similar learning space. What advice do you have for them as they get started?
You can do it. Like that's my biggest thing. I never thought that I could do it. You can do it. I have benefited from the enormous amount of help that the Wildflower Network has been able to give me. But there are also people out there who have done it, kind of from scratch. Find a tribe, find people around you to support you in whatever way that is. So even if it's somebody that if you don't feel strong in marketing, but somebody who has a marketing background, tap them and say, can you help me? Or can you be like a support person unpaid at first? Because none of us have money at first. But then, if I can bring you onto my school, I can, give you some money as maybe a contractor or something. But reach out to people and say, this is what I want to do, and you would be surprised to hear the talents that people have. I just found out there's an author in the midst of my friends or people that I know. And so it's just once you start talking about your vision and once you start talking about what you want to do, people flock to that. And the biggest thing is be passionate about what it is. So, there are so many people who are drawn to our school because they've spoken to me and they can hear the passion in my voice. So be excited and passionate about what it is. Believe that it's going to happen. There will be ups and downs along the way. Like you will have some of the highest highs. I won't say some of the lowest lows, but it will definitely get to those times when you're like, what is going on? But if you just take a deep breath and get through it, try and get support from any way that you can, it'll happen for you.
Amazing. Yes, I think your passion comes through, and I think that you are hopefully inspiring listeners and viewers to go for it, as you say, and find their tribe to go along with them. I know Kareem, your co-founder, feels the same. Sorry that he had technical issues with the internet today, but he echoes, I know when I spoke to you both last week, he echoes your sentiments and has, kind of a similar experience and excitement around this new entrepreneurial journey. So really looking forward to see what happens going forward for you. So if people want to connect with you, Imani, and learn more about Poinciana Montessori, what is the best way for them to do that?
You can email me. We also have a website that is up, and there is a contact form on the website. So the website is Poinciana Montessori. I will slowly spell it for you. Poinicina. There we go. Montessori .org. So I always
Wonderful.
have to spell it.
And I will
And
put
then
that link, yeah, in the show notes. Yep.
you can always email me. I'm Imani, Imani, at poincianamontessori.org.
Amazing. Well, best wishes to you, Imani. I look forward to hearing more about the actual launch. And thank you so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.